All right, thanks for making Locked On Nets your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all podcast platforms, coming at you solo style, following the Nets' loss to the Hornets here on Sunday. Going to be breaking down the great game from Kevin Durant, some of the issues for James Harden here in the early season, some of the rotation stuff we've seen from the Nets as well. Got a packed podcast for you here on a Monday. Thanks for joining us on our walk through the Brooklyn Nets season. We're going to get to the whole thing here in a second, but first, it's the theme music.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Brooklyn, yo. Welcome back to the Locked On Nets podcast and the Locked On Podcast Network, your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. It's another solo episode with Doug Norrie coming at you. DougNorrie.DFSR.com is the website. If you want some basketball projections for FanDuel and or DraftKings, you can also give a follow at Doug Norrie on Twitter or just at Locked On Nets on Twitter as well, where myself and Adam Arbrecht are bringing you all the great stuff you want to kind of be following throughout the Nets season. So go and check all that stuff out. Just some scheduling stuff here. The reason there's two solo pods in between. Adam did a post-game reaction over on YouTube following the loss to the Sixers on Friday night. So make sure you are also subscribed to the Locked On Nets YouTube channel. The link will be in the show notes over there. Seeing really good traction over on YouTube. Super fun doing those videos. This episode will be up there as well. So make sure you are liking and subscribing over on YouTube as well. Coming at you here Sunday evening following the Nets' loss to the Hornets. And this was sort of the tale of two weekends when it came to the Nets, or two games over the weekend. It's a really condensed set of games for them right now. 3 games in 4 days. They played the Sixers on Friday, then they had the day off Saturday, and then they are running the back-to-back between the Hornets, and then they're going to play the Wizards on Monday. So 3 games in 4 days for the Nets, coming off of the high that was the win over the Sixers on Friday. I really wish we had kind of jumped on. We don't usually do full podcasts over the weekend, though like I said, Adam did a pretty long post-game reaction about the Sixers. Do feel like it would have been nice to have jumped on together following the Philly game, because that was just such an awesome win, trailing the entire game, basically into the last, basically a few seconds, minute or so left in the game, and that's when they were able to overtake the Sixers. And then you get this situation here on Sunday against the Hornets, where, Hornets, nice little upstart team, start off the season now 3-0, got a bunch of energy, no Terry Rozier for the Hornets in this one, and the Nets just really couldn't sustain, and that was sort of the story. It's like the consistency that they lacked in order to, really get out in front of the Sixers until the very, very end. And then in this game against the Hornets, it's just this thing where they continue to remain sort of incredibly inconsistent, really on both ends of the court, and that's shown through. And the Hornets, while they're an energetic team, want to push the ball up and down the court for sure, have some really fast guards in LaMelo and then Ish Smith, who played a lot of minutes. This was a situation where the Nets, outside of Kevin Durant, just really weren't able to get anything going. And I'm not really sure at this point what else you expect. What else can Kevin Durant do at this point? Between the 2 games, really the first 3 games of the season, it's a carryover of the playoffs from last year, where it was kind of understood during the playoffs last year that he was really kind of the only guy. Harden was obviously hurt, and Kyrie was completely out. And it was kind of understood, hey, Kevin Durant's going to carry us. But that really wasn't supposed to be the case heading into this season. There's supposed to be reinforcements here. There's supposed to be, it's a fully healthy, presumably, James Harden here. Obviously, no Kyrie. We knew that was going to hurt. But you would think that the pieces for a regular season run, the pieces that they have behind him, would enable them to be able to get something going. And in this game against the Hornets, they just simply weren't able to. Durant was awesome. That one's easy. 38 points, 17 for 24 from the field. Felt like he got to a spot every time he wanted to. Felt like they really had no answer for him on the defensive end. They didn't. He was essentially able to hit everything once he was getting rolling. 5 rebounds, 3 assists as well. But man, the drop-off after him. It's crazy, the drop-off after him. He goes 17 for 24 from the field. The rest of the team combined goes 21 for 63. They shoot 33%. Harden gets 16 shots up. We'll talk about him in a second, what some of his issues are. And it's not all his fault, I don't think. But he can't get anything going. They make a starting lineup change. Javon Carter, nice in the defensive end, gives you nothing on offense in this game. Joe Harris, 28 minutes, 6 total shots, 3 total threes. That's just not good enough at all for this game. I'm not trying to overreact. I'm just giving the situation that's going on with this game in particular. And sort of, like I said, something we've seen for these first 3 games. Claxton gets to start again, and he was pretty bad. But back to Durant. It's great to have Kevin Durant on your team. The Nets are now 1-2. Kevin Durant, by his performances, the Nets should basically be, you would think, be almost like 3-0. I get the Bucks game was sort of an outlier. They should not. I take that back. They shouldn't be 3-0. They should be like 2-1. They should not have lost this game. This game should not be a loss. I know they end up losing by 16. It was definitely closer than that. The fourth quarter was a total mess, and that's where the game got away from them. But Kevin Durant's, like, this performance, to waste a 38.5 rebound performance, forget the rebounds, to waste a 38-point performance in a game where Kevin Durant can't miss. You can't lose these games. It's game 3. Probably not going to remember it once we get to the playoffs. Sure, I get it. Started off 1-2, but these are just simply, you can't lose a game where Kevin Durant can't miss. This is the whole promise of having a guy like Durant on your team, is that when he's rolling, everything else should be easy. And it was really just the opposite. He's rolling and everything looks impossible in this one. Is it fatigue from a pretty hard fought Friday night game? Maybe. Is it just that Charlotte is a very fast team, especially on defense? They shoot a lot of gaps. They're decently long. They're not going to be known as a crazy good defensive team. Definitely gave the Nets problems in some of the lanes and causing them, sort of issues with their length. But it shouldn't be an under 100-point performance at all. And when you have Kevin Durant dropping 38 points, again, this is not the game. I'm going to say it like 50 times here. This is not the game that you can lose. You just can't lose these games. You cannot waste a performance like this early in the season, middle of the season, late in the season. And I just don't really know. All this stuff, again, like I'm going to keep saying it's correctable. And the tone of this podcast would be very different if we had done it right after the Friday win for sure. But just the amount of nothing the Nets got after Durant today is is like a little bit alarming. Not like, the sky is falling alarming, but it's sort of problematic. Because what they're showing a few times here is if Harden is like not completely getting going, they're just really struggling to get a lot of offense going after these guys. And all of a sudden, Patty Mills stops shooting 100% from 3, and you see kind of like what problems you sort of have on your hands on the offensive end. And so, again, are we freaking out as Nets fans? No. Does this look like the team that was favored to win the championship to start the season? Definitely not. That's just there's no way you can say that after a 1-2 start and a loss to the Hornets. Again, by the end of the season, are we going to talk about something different? Probably, but right now, this iteration of the team is a bit all over the place. The rotations are a bit all over the place. It's sort of showing up in this lack of consistency. Kevin Durant is the kind of player that can overcome that because he's just such an individual, unique superstar, unicorn talent that it kind of sometimes doesn't matter what's functioning around him. He's going to get to a spot and get his. But if no one else is going to do anything, then you're going to lose to the Hornets. And that's just what happened. That's just what happened here. So there's some other problems. There's some other stuff we can take a look at. A couple thoughts on James Harden for sure. A couple thoughts on just some of the rotations. I think Adam and I will probably get into the rotations later in the week, especially after we see this Wizards game, because I think we'll see sort of 3 separate games between 3 very different opponents, and it'll be interesting to see what the rotations come out like. But yeah, the Nets right now start 1-2, and it's maybe in some ways it's good that Adam wasn't on here. I wonder if he would have been, if he would have had like a low. He's got usually a steadier hand than me when it comes to just making sure that we don't freak out about stuff. But yeah, this one definitely in the fourth quarter got really, really tough to watch. We're going to talk a little bit more about some of this stuff. Want to get into some of the problems that probably aren't all his fault from James Harden first. Got to talk to you about our friends over at Prize Picks. If you are into DFS or prop games and you want to you want to do some over-unders, you look at player props and you just kind of can tell sometimes, oh, this guy's 17 points, that's way too low. 22 points plus rebounds, that's crazy high. This is the kind of stuff you're going to get over on Prize Picks. You're not going to have to try to make lineups like you have to do on some of these other sites. Prize Picks offers more NBA props than any DFS prop operator. All the superstar players are there, bench players as well, so you can go really deep on your basketball knowledge. It can offer pretty much any prop you can think of. If you're talking about NBA, points, rebounds, assists, all that stuff. If you're talking about NFL, yardage, touchdowns, interceptions thrown, it's all there on Prize Picks. If you are on Prize Picks and you deposit, you can get a match up to $100, but you have to use the promo code NBA. You just go over and pick 2 to 5 players, over-unders and their projections. You can win up to 10x. That's 10 times, folks, on any entry. It's just you versus the projected numbers. You can also just mix and match a little sports. So you're kind of having a Sunday, a little NFL, NBA. Go and combine them all together. You can put this all together on Prize Picks. Don't hesitate. Check out Prize Picks. Use the promo code NBA. Go to the App Store. Download the app as well. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. And also, we've been talking to you about DirecTV Stream for a while. Can it sound familiar to you? You got devices. You're watching the game. I know I'm like this sometimes when I'm not using DirecTV Stream, catching the game live, then I'm just kind of going over somewhere else for my shows. Maybe you're borrowing an account from someone else because you know how that kind of works where you're mixing and matching. You can cure that all with DirecTV Stream. It brings your live TV and on-demand favorites together like never before so you can watch your favorite sports, movies, shows all in one place. No more juggling remotes. No need to buy another device ever again. And no annual contract. You don't want to get locked in. Get rid of the clutter and the confusion and get your TV together with DirecTV Stream. You can learn more at directtv.com. That's directtv.com. Compatible device required. Content varies by package. All right, after Durant, what else was going on here? So let's talk about Harden. The Harden games so far this season have been a bit all over the place. There are some things that I think are on him. There are some things that I think are a little bit on the system, and I think there's some other things that are, we'll just call them external factors, having to do with, I'll just say officiating. So we'll start with Harden first before we get to that third part. He has not looked very crisp to start the season. I think that is unassailable. I don't think there's a lot of debate around that. I think that it's sort of understood why this could be the case, but his game has lacked a certain, I would say like ferocity / crispness to start the season. And it's been like kind of apparent. So that's come out in a couple ways. One, the turnovers have remained a problem so far this season. And this game was no different. He had 8 turnovers in this game. It's terrible. There's not another way to put it. It's 8 turnovers, 13 turnovers in the last 2 games. He's turning the ball over a ton. Some of that is because they are forcing situations specifically on moves to the basket, whether it's lobs to Claxton, where it's where he's getting downhill and then putting the ball like sort of at someone's feet rather than into the basket. Excuse me, not into the actual hoop, but into like the basket where the player is going to be able to handle the ball. We've seen this happen a lot of times. The timing is just off. For a guy like Harden, timing is everything. He's one of the best in the game at this. We see this over and over again, examples all through the years. We saw it a ton last year where his timing with bigs on the team is awesome. He can make even guys who are not that skilled offensively, if they have size, a little bit of wherewithal around the basket, and athleticism, he can make them look awesome. He's done it a ton with a lot of different guys. He made Clint Capella's whole career. Now Capella has gone on to be really good, but he basically turned Russell Westbrook into a guy that could get to the basket at times, right? We saw that when they would spread and Russell Westbrook was basically playing the center. They did this with Bruce Brown last year. We've seen this over and over and over again with Harden, where he's able, because of the gravity that he brings getting to the hoop and his ability to just have absolute laser perfect passes throughout his entire career, this is why he racks up assists in the past, because the passes are almost always exactly where they should be. The timing is perfect. He knows exactly sort of like just the right amount of weight to put on something, right where to put it over a defender, and just right exactly where the ball should be basically every time. This is what makes him one of the very best players in the entire league. It's not just the scoring. We know this. It's ability to facilitate an offense in a pretty unique way, frankly, compared to how a lot of other players attack the point guard position, where he didn't do it a ton, but he can still go very ISO heavy. He can create mismatches. He can get you kind of isolated out on the perimeter with a big, and he pulls into his patented step back three. Or he can get that mismatch going and just get downhill. And if he has a big either kind of running in parallel or even out in front of him a little bit, he makes opposing big men, just kind of in an impossible spot, because he has an unbelievable floater. He has the ability to touch pass really with the best ever in the game, or he can finish around the rim because he's so physical and strong. So we've gotten glimpses of that this season for sure, but there's so much rust on it right now that it is sort of causing problems in the offense for them when the passes just aren't there. The passes to Claxton, he's been force-feeding those. They're just not totally working. They got it going a little bit today, but for the most part, it was just turnover central. And I think there's like this weird growing frustration for him. We saw it in this game too. So we talked about how there's like a couple different factors here. One, the timing's a little off. Two, I'm not sure he's in like 100% great shape. We know he was dealing in the hamstring injury over the offseason, and that he might not be like fully recovered that from a conditioning aspect. So that could be part of it also. Like, he did not go into the offseason healthy. We know this. He played hurt in the final games against the Bucks, and he went in and didn't play Team USA, and he had a soft tissue injury, and sometimes that can take a while to recover from, and it can mean actually not ramping up a ton of cardio, especially on the leg stuff. So if it's just a conditioning thing too, this will all kind of make sense also. So I think those factors are playing in here for him, and it has not, like I said, has not looked crisp all the time. There's been moments where it's looked okay, and there's been longer stretches where it looked okay, but the top-down sort of holistic view of this thing has not been great so far for Harden. And I think that we saw it happen a little bit more in this Hornets game, and it was made mention on the broadcast too, and I think it's correct, is that I think there's a growing frustration for him that he's just not getting fouled in the way that that he has in the past. This is a guy who's predicated his game on drawing contact for the better part of his career. They essentially had to start changing the rules because of things he was doing to get fouled, all of which were totally within the rule book at the time. And then they started changing the rules because it was maybe seen as a little bit excessive in terms of what he was doing. The rip through stuff, the stopping, the jumping into contact a little bit more, faking up to just get the defender going and then just ripping right through the defender. All technically fouls, but all stuff that the NBA has tried over the last couple of years to curb, because growing complaints about whether it's really the type of basketball people want to watch. Inviting fouls rather than just actually going for shots is not, I think most people probably can agree, it's not totally in the spirit of the game, even though it's within the rules of the game. And Harden has kind of the face of a lot of that stuff because he was so damn good at it for years. And so he was getting to the line, 10, 12 times a game. Dropped off a little bit last year to around 7 times a game because, one, he just did start playing differently when he got to Brooklyn. And when he got to Brooklyn, he was much more a facilitator. He was much less just looking for that ISO on the wing stuff, or on the perimeter stuff that he was doing in Houston, where it was dribble till the very end of the shot clock and then chuck a three up. Sometimes it go in, sometimes it miss, sometimes it gets fouled. Like this weird 3 true outcome kind of thing that they were doing in Houston near the end. And that when he got to Brooklyn, he stopped doing that because he just had better talent around him. It made more sense to get everyone into the action, sort of weirdly probably trying to prove a point about the assists at some point, to which he did, because he was just, they lead the league in assists last year. If he didn't, he was close. And so we saw this change in his game. Still, though, got to the line 7 or 8 times a game. Now, he got to the line 1 time in this game and was clearly frustrated that he thought he was fouled a lot of times. Now, NBA players, death taxes, and think they got fouled. That's something that is just, that's the same for every player. Every player thinks they get fouled on, I would say, like 50% of their shots or something like that. That's probably high, but it seems like that sometimes if you watch these guys get down on the complaint train around whether or not they were fouled. Now, Harden, you can make a case though, like statistically, if his game is pretty much the same as he's been playing, and he's sort of he's been the face of these fouls in the past. And Sarah Kustok and guys and Eagle talked about this on the broadcast, and they're 100% correct that there might have been like an overcorrection here from the referees to not want to call fouls for him because maybe he got so many over the years. I don't think it's like an NBA edict or anything, but they clearly went into the offseason wanting to change some of these stop and start fouls, like Trae Young does a lot of these. Where you just allow the defender to run into you, even though you weren't really trying to do anything except for just you speed up and then stop, and then someone just trucks into you. Technically a foul, but they're trying to curb some of that because, again, I think they think it's not in the spirit of the game. They're probably correct, but it's nuts to think that he would just drop off a cliff this much in terms of fouls, especially when the usage is right around the same. And so I think there's a growing frustration for him in this game where I'm definitely team, please stop everyone complaining about the fouls. Like, I absolutely hate when players just complain about fouls every time. It's brutal to watch. I hate it. It ruins the game. It's terrible. Like, could a guy, like, for once, like, not get fouled or just run back? Maybe not. I get they're competitive guys. And with all that said, I do think Harden has a gripe here that he is probably getting a lot more contact, definitely contact that he was used to getting fouls called on in the past. I think that is for sure. And it's that combined with a lot of the stuff are probably fouls. And he's just not getting them. A game where James Harden goes to the line one time, you probably would agree something is off. And so it'll be interesting to see how this corrects. I think when that happens, it kind of like disrupts a lot of the stuff that he wants to do. If he's not getting the contact that he thinks he's going to, if he's not getting the fouls that he thinks he's going to, sometimes those are going to turn into turnovers. I think there could be like some hesitancy in his game that just hasn't been there in the past because this has been sort of a core piece of what he's done. And I think it'll be fine, but I think that's another piece of what's happening for him this season that is sort of against other things that have happened for him in the past. And I think that, like I said, I think there's three different things that are kind of colliding here for James Harden that are making it tough and making the stat lines look rough. Like I said, 8 turnovers is brutal. 15 points, 8 turnovers, 8 assists. Like it's going, even when Kevin Durant has 38 points, when your second best player has 8 turnovers, has as many turnovers as assists, this is how you start losing by 16 when your other superstar had 38 points. And so, again, I think we'll see corrections on some of this stuff, but just trying to give some explanation to Nets fans about what might be happening here rather than just saying, oh, they're playing like junk, right? Or they just look terrible. Or, they just lost another game because they're getting sloppy. Yeah, I think that's part of it. But I think there's other pieces that are sort of factoring in here that are causing these things to probably look maybe a little bit worse than they really are. All right, we'll finish it off here in a second. Talk a little bit about the game coming up against the Wizards. First, got to talk to you about our friends over at Built Bar. You know these guys. We just got the re-up at the Norrie house. The box came. Kids instantly wanted to bite. Wife went for it too. I actually didn't check the flavors on the one that came this one. Sometimes they throw a new flavor on. It might have been a blueberry one that came this time around. That's okay, because if you go to Built Bar, you know you're going to find a flavor that is right for you. They've got everything under the sun here. Mint brownie, raspberry, double chocolate, salted caramel, and more. Built Bar just figured this stuff out, folks. They figured out that making a protein bar actually taste good is the key to victory. They have all the stats to back it up when it comes to the health piece, but they went for the flavor first, and then they made sure the rest of it backed it up. 17 to 18 grams of protein, just 4 to 5 grams of sugar, calories in that 130 to 180 range, 4 to 5 grams of net carbs. Built Bar was the official bar of the U.S. track and field team this past summer. Also, you can go to built.com, use the promo code LOCKEDON, and you'll get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKEDON for 15% off at built.com. And finally, need to talk to you about our friends over at Rock Auto. Buying car parts doesn't have to be a huge hassle. You do not need to go into that local place. Please do not get your auto parts from a mechanic. You don't even know what you're going to be charged over there. And like I said, those local places, all they're doing is type in auto parts into a computer. You can just type it into your own computer. You got a computer on your phone. You got a computer in front of you on your desk. That's all they're using at the local place too. They're just walking into the back and grabbing a part. You can just type in RockAuto.com, find the part yourself, have it sent to you, know that you're going to get prices 30 or even 50% better than those local places. Rock Auto prices are reliably low for every customer. They're not going to just send you that random unmarked box that you find at the local place. You're going to get something. This is a place you can absolutely trust. You just go over that, like, drop down menus for make and model your car, make, model, year. The parts are right there, prices are right there, and you're going to get some of the best prices in the business. They have everything you could think of: brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, even more. Your car's got a lot of parts, folks. You probably know better than me. If you're a do-it-yourselfer, you have to be over at RockAuto.com. They're a family-owned business for over 20 years. You go to RockAuto.com right now. You see all the parts available for your car or truck, right? Locked on in the How Did You Hear About Us box. They'll know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. RockAuto.com. All right, close this out. Another thing that's probably lending itself to, I'm going to call it this herky-jerky beginning of the season for the Nets. 1-2 to start the season. 2, you want to call this a blowout loss? I don't think it really was. 16 can look bad in the final box score. It felt a little closer than that if you watch the game. Just basically got away from them in the fourth quarter. But part of this, like, herky-jerky is another way, like, ups and downs, whatever you want to call what's sort of happening here at the beginning of the season between the game against the Bucks, the win against the Sixers, and this loss against the Hornets, is there's still this kind of all over the place nature with the rotations. This is I don't know if there was the agreement early season was we're going to try as many things as possible and sort of see what works and what doesn't. We're going to play matchups. We're going to, depending on opposing personnel, depending on what we have that night, we're going to throw a bunch of different looks at different teams and just see what works for ourselves. But this game against the Hornets was a great example. We haven't seen Bruce Brown really all year. He plays 27 minutes in this game. Looked fine. Pretty active on the defensive end. Did a lot of the stuff that we like to see, getting into that sort of foul line roll down position that he kind of made famous for himself last year. Just kind of getting into spacing, slashing, cutting. We saw a decent amount of that from Bruce Brown. Again, he played 27 minutes. He hadn't played all season. Now, Blake Griffin sat out this game because on the front end of the back-to-back for the rest. It'll be interesting to see if they swap that for like a guy like Aldridge maybe on Monday against the Wizards. So they're already working with a slightly different personnel. We get Javon Carter, who's played decent amount so far to start the season. He gets into the starting lineup. But they're already running so many different combinations to start the year that it's going to be hard to onboard all that right away also into like a super clean, crisp, offensive sets, offensive sort of fluidity, which is really, frankly, totally been lacking here to start the season for long, long stretches. Sometimes you'll see it kind of happen, and other times it just looks sort of discombobulated, and everyone's trying to piece together where it is they fit with everybody. And Bruce Brown was an example. Nets fans have been calling for Bruce Brown to play, basically since the season. Fans love Bruce Brown. I love Bruce Brown. He was great for what the Nets needed last season. I've been a little surprised that they haven't been able to find a place for him. I kind of thought that going into the season with all these other bigs that he could be odd man out if he wasn't going to be able to shoot, really high volume, consistent corner threes when they were open. He hasn't really shown a total propensity to be able to do that so far. And when that's been the case, it's kind of hard to see where he fits in because he's got to be on the court with a few other floor spacers to make it work at all, for sure. Because if he's not going to be able to space the floor, he kind of needs everyone else too. But when he doesn't play that much and just goes out and plays 27 minutes, are we really expecting it to look super crisp, beautiful basketball? This is going to be another one of these things. And so it just all kind of lends itself to this feeling out process that's sort of happening for the Nets to start the season. It's kind of, I think we talked about last week that we might think we thought it might be a theme sort of over the beginning part of this season, and that really hasn't changed. This game, frankly, hammered it home again that the team is still working on what they think is going to work. The time to experiment is now. This is fine. It's fine to be 1-2 to start the season. Okay, and the season is long. 79 more games to go. Okay, in the regular season, plenty of time to work this out. But if you're expecting guys who have not really played any meaningful basketball minutes together, Jevon Carter, Bruce Brown, Patty Mills, haven't really come together over the course of their short time together. I know Bruce Brown was already on the team together, but what I'm saying is that he's barely played. Patty Mills is basically new to the team. Jevon Carter is 100% new to the team. And so what is the expectation here? LaMarcus Aldridge barely played last season, and he's playing meaningful minutes right now. That's an unbelievable amount of turnover already that they've had this season in terms of guys that are getting a lot of minutes. And it's reasonable to expect that doesn't all look perfect, even among veterans. That doesn't all look perfect to start. There's plenty of timing issues that need to get worked out. There's plenty of spacing issues. There's plenty of figuring out who does what well, what pieces are going to work together well, which ones are not going to work together as well, and figure that over the course of the season. They are working through that process now. They were supposed to have Kyrie Irving for this. They don't. The plan all offseason was to have Kyrie Irving. They do not have him. That's a blow that they are really feeling right now also. That's not a blame thing. That's just what it is. He's not on the team. This is not about what the rule is or Kyrie Irving or whatever else there is. This is just about the plan in the offseason was to have Kyrie Irving on the team. Kyrie Irving is not on the team. Kyrie Irving is one of the best players in basketball. When you lose that and replace it with other players, specifically players who have not played on the team before, you are going to sometimes get basketball that looks like this. That's just it. It's actually pretty simple. You don't need to have watched or followed a lot of basketball to know that's going to be the case. Sometimes it works out pretty quickly. Some teams like the Bulls right now who have a lot of new players, it looks pretty good. Okay, it's not. This isn't a perfect example. I'm just saying that when you get a lot of new guys together, sometimes it can look not that great, and that's what's happening with the Nets now. And all you have to do is look through some of the rotations that they played in different games and how it's kind of changing game to game, and say to yourself, yeah, this is why it's a bit all over the place right now for the team. Why it's probably correctable, but why we're just not seeing this perfect, sort of situation happening. Doesn't help they're not getting much from Harris on the scoring end. Doesn't help Millsap's not playing at all. I'm not exactly sure what's going on with that, if they're just not getting what they want out of his minutes. So there's a lot of questions to be answered about this team. I think we'll still continue to get it. This game against the Wizards, we might see, again, a totally new set of kind of rotations run out there again. Blake will probably now play on the second half of the back-to-back. He'll probably get someone, maybe one or two guys sitting out. They did come out and say it looks like Durant's going to start playing a lot more back-to-backs this season, which is pretty encouraging. So we'll probably get at least him and Harden playing again. But some of these other role players could change again too. Those Bruce Brown minutes might disappear against the Wizards. I'm not sure. Okay, that's a team that runs a little more athletic, a little smaller. So maybe they feel like they can play Bruce Brown in the way that they played, the way that they played him against the Hornets. But I'm not sure because, again, he's a guy that hadn't played a ton and now played a ton in the third game of the season. So this is all to say the Nets, I think, continue to be a work in progress. It continues to be a situation where we're going to need to just, I think, have patience. You don't like to have patience around a team that was the odds-on favorite to win the championship. I totally get that, Nets fans. I understand not liking to see these losses. Starting off the season 1-2 does not feel good. Okay, it's not a good feeling to have the team that you thought was going to probably maybe not even sleepwalk, but just cakewalk its way through the first half, through the regular season, come out and look a little stale, a little out of sorts, a little less than crisp, right? A little mistake prone. All these things that are probably describing some of how the Nets have played in the aggregate over these three games. Because remember, they were losing that whole Philly game. They are very close to being 0-3 right now. Very close. Well, closer to 0-3 than 3-0 for sure, obviously. But they don't stage that kind of epic comeback in the end of the Sixer game. A game they were losing the whole game. They could be 0-3 right now. Okay, so this is a thing that we're going to continue to have to monitor. I think, let's hope that they have a good showing here against the Wizards, who should have Bradley Beal back in this one. We'll see our old friend Spencer Dinwiddie again. Should be a fun game. Wizards have come out and looked decent to start the season in terms of improved, maybe even improved over last year. A team that made its way into the playoffs by the end of it. But should be a fun game to watch. Let's hope they can start working some of this stuff out. Let's hope that we start to see some more consistent rotations, that Nash and company are able to find the things that work. Let's hope they're 2-2 after this game, please. Because I don't know, Nets fans might this might be a rough scene if they start off the season 1-4. Let's just hope they come away with the win on the back-to-back. Like I said at the top, thanks again for making Locked On Nets your first listen of the day. We really appreciate it. Numbers continue to be really strong heading into this beginning of the season. Strong over on YouTube also, where we're seeing that subscriber number tick up. Please go over and like and subscribe to the Locked On Nets YouTube channel. I'll put the link in the show notes. Oof, it's kind of have Adam here, man. Kind of making mistakes on little bits of words here on the way out. Adam and I will be back again following the Wizards game. We'll do a post game. Like I said, hopefully it's a 2-2 situation and not 1-3 for the Nets. In the meantime, much appreciated for everyone that's jumped on. We'll be back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.